The day everything shifted for Emma Carter began with nothing more dramatic than a gray sky and a soft drizzle tapping against her apartment windows. Yet underneath that quiet morning, an uneasy feeling followed her around like a shadow she couldn't shake. She tried brushing it off while getting ready for work. But the thought stayed with her. Something in her home didn't feel the same anymore. Emma, a 30-year-old accountant living in Portland, had built a life of steady calm. She liked routines, soft music with her morning coffee, and coming home to a peaceful space after long workdays. For years, her life had stayed consistent even after painful losses. It wasn't perfect, but it was stable. She had learned to value that. But 3 months earlier, her nephew Luke, 18 and freshly grieving from the loss of his mother, Emma's older sister, had moved in with her. She didn't hesitate when his father asked if Luke could stay. For a while. Emma cared about him deeply and wanted to give him a quiet, safe place to start over. She knew what grief looked like, and she recognized that distance and loneliness could make it much worse from the first week. Emma noticed that Luke carried himself with a kind of cautious politeness. He cleaned up after himself, kept his room in order, and always asked before taking anything from the fridge. If she entered a room, he made space without being told. He acted like a guest, not family, even when she reminded him they were family still. She could see pieces of pain in the way he avoided certain topics, especially anything about his mother. Sometimes she heard him wake at night, pacing softly in the hallway as if walking kept him from breaking. She wanted to help him, but she didn't want to push. So she gave him time, offering small moments of comfort, warm meals, gentle check-ins, quiet hugs when he allowed them. But during the past week, something about him changed. He had become distant in a different way, almost restless. His eyes darted around when she spoke to him. He hesitated before answering simple questions. And sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking, he watched her with a mixture of worry and guilt. She couldn't explain it. But Emma felt a shift, a small crack opening beneath the surface of their household. That evening, as she drove home from work, rain slid across her windshield in long strokes, making the city lights blur like watercolor. She thought about making soup, watching one of her favorite old movies, and maybe talking to Luke about whatever was weighing on him. She didn't like dragging feelings out of people, but she didn't want him carrying everything alone either. When she stepped into the apartment, she immediately sensed tension in the air. Luke was sitting on the living room couch, hands clasped together, elbows resting on his knees. His shoulders were tight, drawn high with stress. He didn't look up when she entered, which was the first sign something was wrong. Normally, he greeted her at least with a small nod. "Luke," she said softly, setting her bag on the chair near the door. "Everything okay?" He lifted his face slowly. His eyes looked tired, more tired than they ever should on someone so young. He swallowed, opened his mouth to speak, then stopped, as though the words were too heavy to say. "Emma?" he whispered, barely louder than the hum of rain outside. "I think I messed up." The way he said it made her heart tighten. Wasn't the tone of someone who broke a rule or got into trouble. It was the voice of someone afraid of disappointing the one person they still trusted. She moved closer and sat across from him, keeping her posture open and calm. "Tell me what happened." But Luke didn't answer immediately. He ran a hand through his hair, breathing unevenly. He looked like he wanted to sink into the couch and disappear. Emma waited quietly, giving him space to find his words. Finally, he exhaled shakily. "I crossed a boundary," he said, "and I'm scared you'll hate me for it." Emma stiffened slightly, though her face didn't show it. She didn't know what he meant, but she did know Luke wasn't the kind of person to hurt someone on purpose. Whatever he had done, she believed there was a reason behind it, maybe pain, maybe fear, maybe confusion. She just needed to understand. "Look at me," she said gently. He did, eyes shimmering with panic. "There is nothing you could do that would make me hate you. But I need you to tell me what you mean." Luke's throat bobbed in a tight swallow. His voice wavered. "I didn't want to. I just..." I don't know why I did it. I wasn't thinking. Emma's chest fluttered with concern. She wanted to ask questions to guide him, but she held back. She didn't want to pressure him into saying something he wasn't ready to share as she studied his face. She remembered the past few months, how he tiptoed around the house, how he apologized for things that weren't his fault, how he avoided talking about his mother. She saw the guilt he had been carrying, the grief he refused to release. She wondered if what he had done had less to do with rebellion and more to do with trying to fill some empty place inside himself. Just as she prepared to speak again, her phone buzzed. A message from Michael, a man she'd met at a cafe a few weeks earlier. He had been kind, patient, and quietly attentive in a way she wasn't used to. They had shared several conversations over coffee. And although nothing romantic had happened, she felt something new stirring in her. She wasn't sure if she was ready to let someone into her life again, but she thought God about him more than she wanted to admit. Emma ignored the message. Luke needed her full attention. He lowered his gaze again. "You're going to think I'm stupid," he murmured, "or selfish." "I won't," she replied softly. Luke squeezed his hands together. I need to explain. But I'm scared it'll change everything between us." Her heart ached at that. Somehow she knew this moment mattered, not just for him, but for both of them. Whatever boundary he meant, whatever mistake he thought he made, it came from a place of hurt, not disrespect. She took a slow breath. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it together." Luke nodded, wiping at his eyes quickly, as if embarrassed to show emotion. Outside, the rain fell harder, as though echoing the tension inside the room. Emma waited. Luke inhaled. And the truth and the shift in their lives was moments away. Luke sat frozen on the couch, eyes fixed on the floor as if the truth he carried might break the room in half. Emma waited, steady and calm, though her heart thudded with worry. She sat across from him, hands folded in her lap, letting this soft rain outside fill the silence between them. Finally, Luke took a shaky breath. "I went into your room," he said quietly. Emma blinked. She didn't react harshly, but the words still surprised her. Luke wasn't the type to invade anyone's privacy. He barely opened a cabinet without asking. "Okay," she said softly, encouraging him to continue. "I went through your drawer," he added, voice cracking. "The one you always keep closed." Emma felt a small, sharp twist in her chest. Not anger, just surprise mixed with a sudden understanding of why he had been acting so restless lately. She knew exactly which drawer he meant. The one holding her sister's letters, photos, and small personal things she kept because they made her feel close to her again. That drawer had been untouched by anyone but Emma for years. But instead of reacting, she watched Luke carefully. His face wasn't that of someone who had snooped out of curiosity. He looked like someone who had done something out of emotional desperation. "Why?" she asked gently. Luke rubbed his palms on his jeans, struggling to find the right words. "I wasn't looking for money or secrets," he said quickly, as if he needed to make that clear. "I was looking for her." Emma's throat tightened. He didn't need to say her name. Emma knew he meant his mother, her sister, Laura. Luke continued, voice raw and trembling. "I found the letter she wrote you, the one you kept hidden. I read it, all of it." He laced his fingers behind his neck, ashamed. "And I'm sorry. Shouldn't have, but I couldn't help it. I missed her so much, and I wanted something that felt like her again." Emma leaned back, a long breath leaving her chest. It wasn't anger that filled her, with sadness mixed with something deeper, something like compassion. She understood that kind of grief. She had lived it longer than he had, Luke. She said softly, "You should have told me you were hurting this much." He shook his head. "You've already done too much for me. I didn't want to bother you or make you feel like you had to fix me." His voice wavered again. "And I didn't want you to think I was trying to replace her by being here." Emma's eyes softened. "You could never replace her. And letting you stay with me isn't about replacing anyone. It's about taking care of family." But Luke still couldn't look at her. "I crossed your boundary," he whispered. "I went into your personal things. I betrayed your trust. I can't believe I did that." Emma reached forward slightly, but didn't touch him. She didn't want to make him feel pressured. "You didn't betray me," she said gently. "You made a mistake, and you made it because you're grieving. That doesn't make you a bad person." His shoulders trembled. "I felt like I was losing her all over again, every day." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "And that letter, it felt like she was speaking again. She talked about you, about how much she trusted you, how she believed you'd look after me someday if I ever needed it. I guess I wanted to feel that trust too, even if I shouldn't have gone looking for it." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle. She remembered that letter. Laura had written it when she was ill, knowing her son would need a strong anchor someday. Emma had kept the letter not because she wanted to hide it, but because reading it too often hurt her heart. It reminded her of the sister she loved so deeply. When she opened her eyes again, she saw the guilt swimming in Luke's expression. He wasn't afraid of punishment. He was afraid of losing her. "Listen to me," Emma said softly but firmly. "You didn't break us. You didn't break anything." She paused to choose her words with care. "I wish you had told me what you were feeling instead of trying to face it alone." He finally met her eyes. "I didn't want to add to your problems." "You are not a problem," she replied without hesitation. Luke sniffed, trying to hold himself together. "I still shouldn't have touched your things." "No, you shouldn't have," she admitted honestly. "But I understand why you did. And that makes all the difference." A quiet moment passed. The rain softened outside, now falling in a steady rhythm instead of a heavy storm. Emma walked to the small bookshelf near the window and opened a wooden box. Inside were a few keepsakes from her sisters, an old necklace, photographs, and a folded note. She returned to the couch and handed the box to Luke. "You don't have to sneak around to remember her," she said. "If you ever want to talk about her or look at things that remind you of her, I'm here. We can face that grief together." Luke stared at the box with disbelief, then lifted it gently as if it were fragile. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "You're not alone." "Not anymore?" His eyes filled again, but this time the tears were different, softer, less trapped. "Thank you," he whispered. Emma sat beside him, not touching him, but staying close. They stayed that way for several quiet minutes, letting the heaviness in the room lighten just a little. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it. Michael, asking if she'd made it home safely. Her heart fluttered with a mix of warmth and nervousness. She liked him, maybe more than she should. She had been guarding her heart for years, but his kindness was slowly breaking through the walls she built to survive her own losses. Luke noticed the small smile she tried to hide. "It's him, isn't it?" he asked softly. Emma hesitated. "Yes, you should talk to him," Luke said, surprising her. "Someone like him. He seems good for you." Emma looked at her nephew, this young man trying so hard to heal, trying to rebuild trust with himself and others. She realized that even in his own pain, he cared about her happiness. "Maybe I will," she said quietly. Luke closed the box and held it against his chest. "Emma, I'm really sorry." "I know," she whispered. "And we're okay." And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt the smallest spark of hope rising inside the sadness, hinting that maybe healing wasn't so far away after all. The days after Luke's confession passed more quietly. Something inside the apartment felt lighter, as if the heavy fog that had been clinging to them finally began to lift. Luke moved through the rooms with less tension in his shoulders, and Emma noticed he no longer avoided her eyes. 'Twas small progress, but it was real. Emma kept a gentle distance, giving him space while still checking in with a smile or a soft question. She knew grief didn't disappear in a moment, but she also knew trust could grow slowly, piece by piece, when someone felt safe enough. And Luke was starting to feel safe again. One Saturday morning, Emma stood in the kitchen making waffles, Luke's favorite breakfast from childhood. The smell filled the whole apartment, warm and sweet. As she plated the food, she heard him walk in, his footsteps lighter than usual. "You're cooking early," he said with a small grin. "I was in the mood," Emma replied. "And you've been trying so hard lately. You deserve something nice." Luke sat down and began eating without hesitation. "Thank you," he said between bites. "It's been easier these days." Emma smiled softly. "I'm glad." But even as she spoke, her thoughts drifted to Michael. He had texted her the night before asking how she was doing. The message was simple, not demanding, not pressing, just warm. She liked that about him. His presence felt steady, like a quiet light in the background of her life. She hadn't decided what to do about their growing connection, but she couldn't deny how comforting it felt. Later that day, as Emma folded laundry in the living room, her phone buzzed. A message from Michael again. "There's a small art exhibit downtown tomorrow. I'd love to go with you, but no pressure at all." Emma stared at the message longer than she meant to. She liked art exhibits. She liked quiet places filled with stories and colors. And she liked the idea of going somewhere that wasn't tied to work or responsibility. But opening up emotionally still felt dangerous. She had been careful for so long, too long. Luke walked past just as she locked her phone, but he had already seen her expression change. "Is that him? Okay?" he asked casually. Emma hesitated, then nodded. "He invited me somewhere." Luke sat on the edge of the couch, thoughtful. "Do you want to go?" "Not sure," she admitted. "It's been a long time since I let myself, feel something. I'm afraid of it." Luke nodded slowly. "I get that. But, Emma, you've been taking care of me, taking care of everyone for so long. You deserve something that's just for you." His maturity caught her off guard. This was the same boy who had been drowning in grief only weeks ago. Yet here he was encouraging her to live again. Emma sighed. "Maybe you're right." "I know I am," he said with a small, confident smile. "Just try. You don't have to decide anything big. It's only an art exhibit." His words echoed in her mind through the night. Eventually, she texted Michael. "Beck. Okay, I'll go. The next afternoon, she met him at the small gallery downtown. The building was bright, peaceful, with soft music playing in the background. When she saw Michael waiting by the entrance, hands in his coat pockets, smiling shyly, when their eyes met, something in her chest softened instantly. "You came," he said gently. "I did," she replied with a nervous smile. "For inviting me." They walked inside together, moving from painting to painting. Michael didn't talk too much or try to impress her. He listened. He asked thoughtful questions. He stayed close, but not too close, giving her space to breathe. When she paused at a painting of a quiet forest, he watched her with patient curiosity. "You like it?" he asked. "It feels peaceful," she said. "Like a place you can go when life gets heavy." Michael nodded. Everyone needs a place like that. Emma felt something warm spread in her chest, feeling she hadn't let herself feel in years. Safety, comfort, hope. There was no pressure, no fear of expectations, just the soft unfolding of something new. After the exhibit, they walked outside into the cool air. Leaves rustled along the sidewalk, and the city sounded calm around them. "Thank you," Emma said softly. "I really needed this." Michael smiled. "I'm glad you came. You deserve moments that are yours." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She looked away quickly, not wanting him to see the emotion in her eyes. When she returned home, the apartment lights were still. Luke sat on the couch with a textbook open, pretending to study, but clearly waiting for her. "How was it?" he asked immediately, though he tried to keep his tone neutral. Emma hung her coat and smiled. "It was nice. Really nice." Luke grinned, the first real grin she had seen from him in weeks. "See? You did something for yourself. Us. A good thing." She sat beside him. "Thank you for pushing me a little." Luke shrugged. "You push me all the time. It's only fair." But then his smile faded. replaced by a thoughtful, almost anxious expression. He closed his textbook and sat up straighter. "Emma, there's something else I need to tell you." Her pulse quickened. "What is it?" He hesitated, chewing. On the inside of his cheek, "It's about that night. When I went through your drawer, it wasn't just the letter." Emma's chest tightened again, not from fear, but from anticipation. She stayed quiet, letting him find his courage. "Luke continued, voice low. "I also saw the birthday card Michael gave you. I didn't read its high promise, but I saw his name and I saw the way you kept it. And I guess I panicked." Emma blinked. Why would that make you panic?" "'Cause I felt like I was taking up too much space in your life," he said, eyes filling again. "Like you couldn't be happy or move forward because you were too busy taking care of me." Emma's breath caught. She hadn't expected that. "Luke," she said softly, "you're not holding me back. You're healing. And helping you doesn't stop me from living my own life. It never has." Luke looked down. "I just didn't want to ruin anything for you." She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, light, reassuring. "You haven't ruined anything. You've only reminded me how much family matters. And Michael, he understands that." Luke lifted his eyes slowly. "Are you going to see him again?" Emma smiled quietly. "Yes, I think I will." For the first time in months, the apartment didn't feel heavy or silent. It felt like a place where two people, one healing, one learning to open her heart, again were finding their way back to life, together. The weeks that followed seemed to move faster than Emma expected. The quiet apartment that once carried the weight of unspoken pain slowly filled with something gentler, warm conversations, healing moments, and the slow rebuilding of trust. Luke no longer disappeared into his room after dinner. He talked more, asked more questions, and even laughed now and then. Emma saw pieces of the boy he used to be before life broke his world apart. But healing wasn't a straight path. Some nights still felt heavy. Sometimes Luke woke up from dreams he couldn't explain. Sometimes Emma lay awake thinking about her sister, wondering if she was doing enough or doing anything right at all. But the difference now was that neither of them hid their feelings the way they once did. One Friday evening, Emma prepared dinner early because Michael was coming over. It wasn't a date, not officially, but he had offered to stop by and help with a small broken shelf in the hallway. It was a simple gesture, but one that meant more to her than she admitted out loud. Luke watched her move around the kitchen, noticing the nervous energy she tried to hide. "You're smiling more these days," he said, handing her a bowl. "Suits you," Emma laughed softly. "Well, it's been nice having someone to talk to." "Someone who's not me," Luke said with a playful shrug. "You're easy to talk to, too," she replied. "But it's different with him. Not better, just different." Luke nodded, understanding more than she expected. "I'm glad you have someone like him. You deserve that kind of calm." Emma paused, touched by his sincerity. Before she could respond, there was a knock on the door. Luke stepped back, letting Emma greet Michael. Michael stood there holding a toolbox and offering his usual warm smile. "Hope I'm not interrupting dinner prep." "Not at all," Emma said, stepping aside to let him in. Luke greeted him politely before retreating to the living room with a book. Emma knew he was giving them space, not out of discomfort, but out of respect. Michael quickly fixed the shelf, making light conversation with Emma as he worked. When he finished, they stood in the hallway for a moment, the silence comfortable but filled with unsaid emotions. "Thank you," Emma said, meaning much more than the simple repair. "You don't have to thank me," Michael replied. "I like being here." Their eyes met, and Emma felt a quiet warmth bloom inside her. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was steady, like the first feeling of spring after a long winter. Michael didn't stay long. After he left, Emma returned to the living room to check on Luke. He was still pretending to read, but the smile tugging at his lips told her he had noticed every detail. So he said casually, "When's the next time you're seeing him?" Emma sat on the arm of the couch, invited me to a small dinner with a few of his friends next week. "And?" Luke asked, raising an eyebrow. I said yes. Luke's smile widened. Good. But then his expression softened. Emma, I haven't told you something important. She turned fully toward him, feeling the shift in his tone. What is it? Luke closed the book, resting it on his knees. His voice was steady, but there was a hint of nervousness underneath. I've been thinking a lot about that boundary I crossed. It's not just about the drawer, about the way I shut you out. It's the way I made you worry without telling you why. Emma stayed silent, letting him continue. When I moved here, I was so lost that I clung to anything that reminded me of my mom. And when I found that letter, it broke something open inside me. I didn't want to admit how desperate I felt. I didn't want you to see how weak I was. That's not weakness, Emma said softly. That's grief. He nodded. Maybe. But I'm not proud of how I handled things. What matters is how you're handling them now, she said. And you're doing better. Luke took a breath, gathering courage. I realized something else too. I've been scared to move forward. Scared that if I started feeling okay again, I'd be letting go of her. But staying stuck was hurting me and hurting you. Emma reached out and placed a gentle hand on his arm. You're not letting go of her. You're learning to live with her memory. That's different. Luke's eyes glistened. I want to keep getting better. I want you to know that I'm trying. Not just for myself, but because you deserve. Peace, too. You've carried so much for me. She squeezed his arm lightly. I carried it because family carries each other. That's what love looks like. Luke swallowed hard, overwhelmed. I know, and I'm grateful. It's more than I can say. Emma stood and walked toward the balcony door, opening it to let in the cool evening air. Luke followed her. The sky was turning a shade of deep blue, the city lights flickering against the horizon. They stood side by side, letting the breeze wash over them. This doesn't feel like the same home it used to, Luke said quietly. Because we're not the same people we were, Emma replied. We're both healing. Luke looked at her, thoughtful. Can I ask something? Of course. When you let Michael in, does it feel scary? Emma laughed softly. Terrifying, but also good. Like maybe it's time. Luke nodded. Slowly, I think Mom would be happy for you. Emma's breath caught. The words hit deeper than he knew. She looked at him, tears filling her eyes not from sadness, but from a familiar mix of grief and gratitude. And she'd be proud of you, Emma whispered. More than you think. Luke inhaled shakily. Thank you for everything. Emma placed a hand on his shoulder, steady and warm. We're both learning, both growing. That's what matters. The city lights shimmered as a soft breeze brushed through the balcony. The world outside felt larger, brighter, full of new beginnings. Luke exhaled, letting go of something heavy he had carried for far too long. Emma stood beside him, feeling her own heart open a little wider. They didn't need to say anything, else the moment spoke for them. A boundary had been crossed once out of pain. But now, new boundaries were being built, healthy ones. Loving ones shaping the life they would move into next. And for the first time in a long time, their future didn't feel uncertain. It felt hopeful.